Guys, we're gonna be on. Hi there, how you doing? Hold on a second. Hi, everybody. We're going to get started in just a couple seconds, okay? We'll give everybody 3 minutes to log in, and then we'll get started. We are recording this session, so if you do not want your face to be recorded, just make sure you turn your video off. You guys are going to start being muted, but as we go through, if you want to answer questions, feel free to unmute yourself, and then you can answer your questions, then mute yourself again, okay? There's not going to be a ton of like lecture content today. We're going to do a little bit more exploring around the garden. All right. Welcome, everybody. I'm Miss Chrissy, for those of you who don't already know me. And today I am doing the class from our garden over at Benham. So behind me, you'll see our pollinator garden. So we started this garden last year, and in it we have a lot of perennial plants that grow back every single year. So one of my favorites is this one right here. It's got the purple flowers, and that's a lilac. And so a lot of our plants, when we planted them last year, they were very small, but already we're not even into June yet, and already they're getting quite large. So we only have a couple flowers that are in bloom so far, but pretty soon, with all the sun and the rain that's been here lately, we're gonna have a lot of flowers blooming. So it'll be a nice place to stop and take a look if you guys come out here for walks or anything this summer. So I wanted to just do a really quick recap. Last time we spoke, we were talking about pollinators and pollination and butterflies. And so we talked about, we have many different insects and birds and animals that actually help with pollination. And the reason, what they do is they're looking for food typically. And so they go and they visit flowers for nectar. And then while they're there, they happen to get pollen all over them, which they bring to different flowers. And that allows the flowers to produce seed and the fruits that we eat. So did you guys know that about 75% of the plant-based food that you guys eat comes from pollinated flowers? So if we didn't have pollination, if these pollinators didn't do their job, you wouldn't have apples, you wouldn't have bananas, you wouldn't have cucumbers, you wouldn't have pumpkins. All of these things come from the result of pollination. So we really rely on these pollinators for our food. So the problem is, and you guys I know have been learning about this in your studies, but the problem is that pollinators are starting to decline in population. That means that there's fewer and fewer of our pollinators to help us. And especially one of the number one most efficient pollinator who pollinates, I'd say about 80%, I think, of all the pollination that happens is the bees. And the bee population is starting to be negatively impacted. So what I wanted to do is I wanted to start off by getting some feedback from you guys. You can let me know what you know about what is causing the decrease in the population of our pollinators. So does anybody want to offer, I have a little list here, we can start. Can anybody offer something that they know of that's causing the population of pollinators to decrease? You can just unmute yourself or type in the chat if you would rather.
I think I know, because some people are putting dangerous chemicals.
Dangerous chemicals. Okay, so we call those pesticides. Yeah, right. So a lot of times in like really big farms, they take up what they call crop dusters, which are airplanes that spray pesticides out the back. And the reason they're doing that is because they're trying to get rid of maybe the bad bugs that they think are bad bugs, like beetles and aphids and things like that, that are going to eat their food, eat the crops that they're trying to grow. And so they just blast it with pesticides. But the problem is those pesticides can negatively impact other good insects as well that help us with pollination. Okay, so we have pesticides. Now I volunteer over at the Natick Community Organic Farm, and one of my jobs for them, because they don't use chemicals on their crops to get rid of all these insects that might be damaging them. So what they have to do is they have people like me that volunteer, where we have to go around in the garden, turn leaves over, look underneath to see if we can see any of the insects. If we see them, we pick it off with our fingers and squish them, or add them into a bucket and go feed them to the chickens. So we have to physically go out and remove these bad insects so that they don't impact the crops, but not spray those dangerous chemicals on the plants. And that's not always feasible if it's a really huge farm. But of course, the more we can reduce those pesticides, the better. Does anybody have another one?
CCD.
Sorry, say that again.
CCD.
BCD?
CCD.
Oh, CCD. Is that a chemical as well?
I forget, but I know it's something that's killing pollinators.
Pollinators. Okay, so that's probably another type of chemical or pesticide. So I'm going to put that as, I'm just going to say pesticide / chemicals. Okay. Anything else?
I don't know, but I think maybe like a lot of places where bees live, some people might not plant like the flowers that they like, and they might not do like, and they might not get food from nectar because there's no flowers they eat, and they die because there's no flower. They can't find any flowers.
Exactly. So I'm going to call that, there's a big word called urbanization / removal of native plants. Okay. So what urbanization means is that as we build more towns and cities and parking lots and fields and things like that, we're removing all of the plants that were there and building something that does not help our pollinators. Okay, so here at the school, if I look around, we have a lot of fields, right? So I'm over on the side by the garden, but you can see that there's a lot of grass, and grass looks very pretty, right? It's fun to run on, it's nice and soft on your feet. But the problem is that grass doesn't provide any nectar for our pollinators, and it also does not provide any place for them to hide or to grow, like those host plants that they are allowed to, like for example, butterflies will metamorphosize on in their chrysalises. So by urbanization and replacing native plants and putting in things like yards or other plants that these pollinators can't eat, we're removing their food and habitat resources. Okay, can you think of anything else? Those are two really good ones.
Okay.
Any other suggestions? So sometimes, I'll give you a couple. So sometimes as we change these environments and the habitat for these insects, we can also change the type of insects that come to an area. So sometimes there might be more aggressive insects that weren't there before. So there are insects that will go and kill entire bee colonies, and they'll take over their colonies. So sometimes we're going to call those predators are introduced into areas where they weren't there before, and they start killing off our bee population. Okay. Predators, hopefully I spelled that correctly. It looks funny for some reason as I'm writing on a whiteboard. The other thing, oops, can you guys see me a little bit better now?
That's perfect.
All right, awesome.
Thank you, Ms.
Sorry about
Chrissy.
that. I am using my cellular network, and unfortunately at the school, it's not always the best. So I'm doing the best we can with what we have, unfortunately, because the school doesn't have any of the Wi-Fi and stuff yet. So turned on. So, okay. So where we left off, so we talked about pesticides. We can start using less of them. We can make sure that we're planting things that are native to the area or that our pollinators need. By just doing some of these things naturally, the insect and the predator will balance out a bit. And then climate change, obviously, it's the whole taking care of our environment, the whole reusing, recycling, making sure that we're not wasteful, things like that. Okay? Do anybody have any questions or anything that they missed when my connection was cutting out? No? Okay. So what we're going to do now is we're going to kind of walk around. I have two of my helpers here in the background. We're just going to walk around the school. We'll try to do this as best we can. But what we want to do is we're going to look at, and actually give me 1 second, I left it over here. Okay, so what we're going to do is last time when we met, we talked about the butterfly plant dependencies. Okay, so we're going to switch back to just butterflies here for a minute. And we talked about, depending upon the type of butterfly, depending upon the stage in their life cycle, they're going to need, and they're very dependent upon different plants. So the monarch specifically needs milkweed in order to lay the eggs, and then that's what the caterpillars are going to eat when they hatch. But then as they become a butterfly, they need nectar plants. So we're looking for butterfly bush, coneflower, aster, liatris, rudbeckia. So many flowering plants that are going to have the nectar for the monarch butterflies. And then each butterfly has different requirements or different needs. Now, we actually did this lesson a couple days ago, but unfortunately the connectivity wasn't great, so we didn't get a good recording. So I'm going to try to re-record some of the parts of the discussion today and put everything together. So now that we've talked about the problem, some of the things that we can do to solve it, what we're going to do is we're going to switch over and focus a little bit more on our butterflies, which are our pollinators that we are looking at this year. Our larvae have not come in yet. They're supposed to be in next week, but when they get here, we want to make sure that we have a habitat that is going to be able to support them. So what I have here, and I've already started to check it off at our class the other day, so I'll show it again as we go towards the end, but I have a field study checklist, which I'll make available on our website if anybody wants to do a field study at home. But what it does is it goes through different types of butterflies, and it talks about what host and nectar plants are needed for that butterfly. And then also a couple items that all of our butterflies need. So for example, protected woody spots like bushes or wood piles that they can go to form their chrysalises or just get away from predators. They need shade and shelter from wind, so they often are looking for tall grasses. Shallow water pools that they can perch on, so maybe a shallow bowl or just like a little puddling spot. And then also sunny resting spots, so maybe a flat rock or a pile of wood, something like that, where they can get some sun. So we're going to walk around the garden and honestly the surrounding school area, and we're just going to look to see what we can find, because over in kind of behind the camera here, we have a long tree line, and from afar it just looks like all the same kind of tree. It's just green. But when you get in close, you can see that there's different species of trees, there's bushes, there's plantings and things that are creeping along the ground. So we want to take a look at that and see if they meet the needs of any of our butterflies, to see if we have a good environment for them. So let's get started. Okay, so we are over on the side of the school. You see there's a nice long tree line down the side of the field. So I'm just going to walk around and show you some of the different plants that we have here, and then I'll go ahead as we go along. I'll check them off on our list, and when we get back over in the garden, we'll take a look at which butterflies we think we are best suited for. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, we are back over in the garden, and when you're coming towards the school, the first thing to greet you is actually our pollinator or butterfly garden. So we're going to go ahead and take a look here, but right off the bat, right behind me by the sign here, this bush, which is going to offer both some nectar for our pollinators, but also some woody spots for protection, is our forsythia. Now it's already gone through its bloom, so it's just nice and green and lush for the summer, but this is a very nice plant. I don't know that it's native, but it's found everywhere around here. So I'm going to walk you around and just point out a couple of the other plants that we have here that are either nectar or host plants. Okay, we're back in our pollinator area, and I just wanted to recap some of the plants that we saw that we have here for our butterflies. So first off, we have forsythia, which is right behind me, and again, while it's not specifically on the list that our butterflies like for nectar, it does offer Dusty. Okay, we are back in the perennial pollinator garden, and I just wanted to recap some of the things that we found on our walk around the area. So over in the wooded space, we saw some glossy buckthorn, some Norway maple, the multiflora rose, which has those nice white flowers for maybe like the bees. And we didn't really see it, but in the background there, behind the kind of the foliage, there are a couple of birch trees back there. That really cool grapevine that we saw hanging down, where we've got actually a lot of that now. And then we had the crabapple tree, which has great blooms, but it also creates fruits for some of our other animals. And then that creeping Charlie, which a lot of people often see as being a weed, but it can be quite beautiful, and it's great for our pollinators. So a lot of what we saw on the tree line was really those woody protected spots that our butterflies need. And then back in our perennial garden here, we do have the forsythia, which is great for bees, but it's also a great wooded spot for protection for our butterflies. We have the tall grasses, which they use for shade and also protection during the wind. We have our milkweed plants, which are going to be our host plants for our butterflies, especially our monarch butterfly. They like to, their eggs are laid on the underside of the leaves, and the caterpillars are going to eat just the leaves when they hatch, and then that's what they are going to continue to eat until they form their chrysalis and become a butterfly. For our nectar plants, we found asters. A lot of these things we don't have the blooms yet, but we did see at least the beginnings of them. The lilac, which is already in bloom. We found a liatris or two. We have our sunflowers, which are a little bit small now, but they will grow pretty big. We have a bunch of daylilies that will bloom soon. Coneflower. Now a lot of these things, these are all perennials, so these are going to come back year after year with the exception of maybe the sunflowers and zinnias. So we have our zinnias, some of which I really need to get in the ground before they perish. We have our marigolds, and marigolds are great because not only are they good for some of our pollinators, but a lot of these plants can offer other benefits to keep other pests away. So I've been told that marigolds and mint and things like that can be planted to keep mosquitoes away from your yard. We have the rudbeckia, which looks like the black-eyed Susan. And we have the parsley, which is an herb, and then another kind of herb is the chives. And so all of these plants are really great for our pollinators. So if we go ahead and take a look at the field study checklist, you'll notice that aside from the crab apples, that's really the only host plant that we have checked off for any of the other butterflies, aside from the monarch butterfly, which consumes the milkweed. So really right now we are best suited for our monarch butterfly. And maybe the red spotted purple, because I didn't check it off here, but we also do have milkweed here, so that is a nectar plant for our red spotted purple. So we don't have a lot for them, but we do have more than these other butterflies as well. And honestly, the nectar plants are going to be very similar for all of the butterflies. It's really the host plants that need to be specific to the type. And actually it looks like I didn't check off some of the other ones here as well. So we did see a birch tree, there is parsley that we have, so the tiger swallowtail might be a good one for us as well. In terms of nectar plants, we checked off almost everything here for the monarch butterfly, with the exception of probably the butterfly bush, which gets very big, so we're not able to put one here in our small butterfly garden. Down at the bottom with the things that all butterflies need, we did, like I said, we saw the protected woody stiff spots. A lot of people also, if you don't have a big tree line or a lot of bushes, I've seen a lot of people put out those bug hotels, which are just stacked wood that has little holes in it, or the houses that have thin slats in them that butterflies and other pollinators can go and get protection. We also have some tall grasses for shade and shelter, and we have sunny resting spots, which we didn't specifically point out during our walk, but you'll see even just under the sign we have a nice little stepping stone there, and the entire garden is lined with rocks, which our butterflies could sun upon. The one thing that we are missing at the moment, where if we're going to improve this space we could add, is some shallow water pools. So maybe the bottoms of like the water catchers for pots, or a plate, or just something that would catch rainwater and has a lip on the end that our butterflies could perch upon. So that's something that we could definitely add to our garden to make it better as a habitat for specifically our monarch butterflies. So that's all we're going to do for today in the garden. Thank you so much for going on a little walk with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go home and get a little bit messy and show you how we make seed bombs. Because like I said, one of the problems with our pollinators is that a lot of people are cutting down a lot of the plants that our pollinators need, whether they think they're weeds or they just need space to build. And so what we can do is we can make these little seed bombs, which are balls of mud that you roll in wildflower seeds that are native to the area, that you can just toss into open fields or spaces and bring some of those flowers, those nectar and host plants back for our butterflies and other pollinators. So thank you very much, and I will see you soon. Here, this bush right here, this is a glossy buckthorn, and you can see that from the style of the leaves and the fact that they're a little bit shiny. And I actually have, I don't really know all of these plants by heart, but I do have little cheat sheets here that I can look at, and I also have a app on my phone that allows me to identify plants. So here, just to kind of show you, okay, now this one here is a mulberry bush. And then in the back here, this one right here has kind of like a toothed leaf. You can see that there's little spiky edges on it. This one is a multiflora rose. And you can see that it has nice white flowers on it, which would be great for some of our pollinators like the bees and maybe some other butterflies. This one's kind of cool. So this plant that's kind of hanging down, let me get a step back so you can see. This is a vine, and this is a plant that doesn't typically grow around a school, but somebody planted some Concord grapes a long time ago at the end of this tree line, and they are starting to kind of creep and take over everywhere. So these are grapes that are hanging down here. You can even see, it's a little windy, but if the wind dies down, you can even see the grapes are starting to form on these branches. It's a little fuzzy. Let's see if I can get a better angle here. There we go. So those are the grapes that are starting to form on this vine. All right, we'll keep walking down. We have more Norway maple, a lot of the glossy buckthorn. And like I said, behind this tree line, there you can see inside there are a number of trees that you can only see from going inside, which I'm going to try to avoid today if I can. Got my dog with me and he just makes a mess of everything. All right, so this right here, this is a crab apple, and you'll see that there are flowers that have started to die off, but these crab apple trees will have some fruit on them, and there are a number of butterflies that do like apple trees for their nectar. All right, let's see what else we have over here. One of the plants here at the garden that we have in abundance, which a lot of people often see as a nuisance or a weed, is this creeping Charlie. So that's this purple flower on the ground, and it really takes off and spreads. So this can take over everything, and it's actually all over the garden. I had to take a bunch of it out myself this spring because it was taking over some of our vegetable beds. But right now, it's only left in one of our flower beds that we haven't prepared for the spring yet. We're not doing that this year. So there's a lot of that creeping Charlie, and those flowers, again, are great for some of our pollinators. So that's just a few things that we have found over on the tree line. Most of it is going to offer shelter, or it's going to offer just places for our butterflies to hide. But there are a few nectar flowers here that some of our butterflies do like, and then for our other pollinators as well. So very beneficial. As we're walking back over to the garden, I just wanted to point out, because this is a great place, we have a big field here. And at home we have a lot of backyards and places for kids to play. And we try to get the lawns as pristine as possible. A lot of adults just want a nice carpet of grass. Here at the school, we don't really pay that close attention, so there are all kinds of things here that are growing that many people might consider to be weeds and would do their best with herbicides, just pulling stuff out that they would try to get out of their lawn. But these things are very beneficial to our pollinators. So here in the grass on the ground, you can see that there are some flowers. We've got some dandelions, there's clover in here, which has little white flowers on it. There's a lot of things here that we may see as pests or weeds, but for our pollinators, these are welcomed. Okay, so in the front here by our sign, we have a number of marigolds. We have some dahlias in there, and I have some zinnias that I haven't quite gotten in the ground yet, but they're gonna come back. I just gave them some water. They got a little dehydrated yesterday, and then we'll get those in the ground. But we've got a number of those marigolds and dahlias. We have some daisies that are in there. You'll see that it's really hard to tell what things are in the early spring because they don't have the blooms yet. So I oftentimes just leave the tags next to the plants that I put in, so that way I can tell what they are in the spring. So we have some nice tall grasses that are great for shade for our butterflies. We have a bunch of rudbeckia. We have some liatris. Now you might not know what those are if I'm rattling off the names. So I'm going to show you a couple of the cards that I have here so that you can see what they are. So we have some, that's that butterfly weed right there, that tag. It hasn't started coming up yet. We've planted some seeds for milkweed this year, but we do have a number of milkweed plants that are starting to get a lot taller, which is great because when our larvae come in the next week, they're going to need that milkweed to consume in their caterpillar state. We also have some nice lilacs here, some echinacea. I believe we have some asters in here somewhere. Oh, here's the asters right here. Number of flowering plants that are going to be good for our butterflies. Okay. And then also there are some things like herbs that are good for our butterflies and pollinators. So here we have some parsley. And then further on down in the garden, if we take a walk, we have an herb bed along the back here. And we have some chives, which have these beautiful purple flower, which are really nice. And then this year, this is not necessarily for our butterflies. We do have a bunch of sunflowers in these beds here that are going to be great. But for our other pollinators, we do have a new addition of some strawberries this year. So you'll see there are these beautiful white flowers. And the great thing about strawberries is you can very easily see the value of pollination, because these flowers are not going to become strawberries unless they get pollinated. So here you can see this white flower, and then right next to it is what's becoming a strawberry. So that flower is going to have the petals fall off, and then the center of it is going to get larger and larger, and then it's going to ripen into a strawberry. And remember, pollination is needed in order for plants to create seeds. And for a strawberry, the seeds are contained on the outside of those strawberries. Okay, so now we're going to go back to where we started, and then we can take a look at our checklist to see what we have. Okay, we are back in the perennial pollinator garden. And I just wanted to recap some of the things that we found on our walk around the area. So over in the wooded space, we saw some glossy buckthorn, some Norway maple, the multiflora rose, which has those nice white flowers for maybe like the bees. And we didn't really see it, but in the background there, behind the kind of the foliage, there are a couple of birch trees back there. That really cool grapevine that we saw hanging down, where we've got actually a lot of that now. And then we had the crabapple tree, which has great blooms, but it also creates fruits for some of our other animals. And then that creeping Charlie, which a lot of people often see as being a weed, but it can be quite beautiful, and it's great for our pollinators. So a lot of what we saw on the tree line was really those woody protected spots that our butterflies need. And then back in our perennial garden here, we do have the forsythia, which is great for bees, but it's also a great wooded spot for protection for our butterflies. We have the tall grasses, which they use for shade and also protection during the wind. We have our milkweed plants, which are going to be our host plants for our butterflies, especially our monarch butterfly. Their eggs are laid on the underside of the leaves, and the caterpillars are going to eat just the leaves when they hatch, and then that's what they are going to continue to eat until they form their chrysalis and become a butterfly. For our nectar plants, we found asters. A lot of these things we don't have the blooms yet, but we did see at least the beginnings of them. The lilac, which is already in bloom. We found a liatris or two. We have our sunflowers, which are a little bit small now, but they will grow pretty big. We have a bunch of daylilies that will bloom soon. Coneflower. Now a lot of these things, these are all perennials, so these are going to come back year after year with the exception of maybe the sunflowers and zinnias. So we have our zinnias, some of which I really need to get in the ground before they perish. We have our marigolds, and marigolds are great because not only are they good for some of our pollinators, but a lot of these plants can offer other benefits to keep other pests away. So I've been told that marigolds and mint and things like that can be planted to keep mosquitoes away from your yard. We have the rudbeckia, which looks like the black-eyed Susan. And we have the parsley, which is an herb. And then another kind of herb is the chives. And so all of these plants are really great for our pollinators. So on our list, I'm going to come back to my tire here. On our list, we had our host plant, which was milkweed. So we did find some milkweed in our garden. We did find the coneflower, which is also called echinacea. We found some sunflowers. We found marigolds. We found liatris was in there as well. And I don't think we found asters, but we have a good amount of host and nectar plants for our monarch butterfly. Now, looking around the garden, do you see any sunny resting spots? You can shout it out if you see something. Can you see any place where
I see something.
What do you see?
It was a bush.
Some of the bushes? They could rest there. Where else? Does anybody else see anything else?
They could rest on turn a little bit to the right.
Resting on tall trees. They could rest on the tires.
They could rest on the tires. What else is all around this little garden that they could rest on?
I know.
What?
Tall plants.
They could rest on tall plants. If you guys know of like lizards and stuff, where do they rest in order to get warmth?
Rocks.
Rocks, exactly. Do you guys see all the rocks all the way around? So lots of rocks they could rest on as well. There's one thing missing though. If we look at our list, what's one thing that we did not spot during our walk or looking at the pollinator garden? Do you guys see anything on the list that we don't have yet? We have sunny resting spots, so I'll check that off. Anything else?
Places to lay eggs.
Well, the eggs would be on the milkweed, but somebody else said something.
Water.
Pupas.
Now, the pupas would go on the milkweed leaves, but you're right, water. We don't have any shallow water pools. Okay, so what we need to do, I think, in order to make this habitat better for our monarch butterflies, is we should get some sort of like a shallow pool of water that we leave out here. So do you guys have any ideas, anything that at home that I might be able to grab and put out here that would give a shallow resting space? Shallow water pool for our butterflies? What could we put out here?
I have a bird pool. I can give you because I
A
don't use.
bird pool. Yeah, that's perfect. Does it kind of look like a dish with a little lip on the end?
Yeah, and my dad's friend gave it to us.
Yeah.
And yeah, but I don't know. I think it's in my garage now, but we don't use it anymore.
Well, if you guys do not, if you really don't need it, you can feel free to drop it off here at the garden. This is your garden as third graders, so you are welcome to add things here if it makes sense. Don't plant anything here unless you ask me first. But if you have like painted rocks that you guys make, or if you have a little dish that you could add here to collect water and provide water spots for the butterflies, or if you, for example, have a butterfly house that you made that you want to use in the garden, that is all fine. We want this to be a community space and really build it up to be a good environment for our monarch butterflies, okay? Because we want to protect our pollinators, and the monarchs are just one of them, but we want to just take a look at what all of our pollinators need and make sure they have the right habitats, okay? All right, any questions for you guys? Or do you guys have anything to add?
Like I have no.
No? All right, so, oh, go ahead. You can talk. I'm going to walk, but you can talk to me while I'm walking.
I think you should plant a lot of milkweed so we can, so a lot of monarchs come.
I agree. And every year we try to add at least 2 or 3 milkweed plants. And this year, luckily, they're coming up really good. But yes, we definitely need to get more milkweed in. You'll see like around, you know, the signs that we have in the garden. We planted milkweed all through here. So this right here, this little guy, that's milkweed that's coming up. There's another one on the other side. So this year we planted some in the background here so that they have enough space to get nice and big. So that's all we're going to do for today in the garden. Thank you so much for going on a little walk with me. What I'm going to do is I'm going to go home and get a little bit messy and show you how we make seed bombs. Because like I said, one of the problems with our pollinators is that a lot of people are cutting down a lot of the plants that our pollinators need, whether they think they're weeds or they just need space to build. And so what we can do is we can make these little seed bombs, which are balls of mud that you roll in wildflower seeds that are native to the area, that you can just toss into open fields or spaces and bring some of those flowers, those nectar and host plants back for our butterflies and other pollinators. And then we get to move on to the fun stuff. I'm going to roll up my sleeves because we are going to be working with our seed bombs. And as I mentioned before, our seed bombs are very messy. They have, you'll see at the bottom here, there's this reddish clay. This stuff stains. So when you're doing this at home, make sure that you have an area that either you don't mind getting dirty or that can be easily cleaned. So put down some newspaper or, you know, a disposable plastic tarping or tablecloth, and make sure you wash their kids' hands right away. Don't let them run around the house with the stuff on their hands because you're going to have quite a mess, and it's not easy to get out. And also, of course, make sure they're not wearing their best dress while they're doing this either. So in this container, I have a mixture that is a 3-to-5 ratio of clay to soil. And what we need to do is we need to wet this and mix it up. So when we wet it, we just have to be very careful that we do it slowly, because if you put too much water, it's one of those things you can always add, but you can't remove. So I always put in about a teaspoon of water to start. Okay. And then I mix it around. You can use the back of the spoon like I'm doing. You can use a toothpick, not a toothpick, a popsicle stick, just a stick that you pick up off the ground outside, whatever works for you, okay? So what you're looking to do is to mix up the clay into the soil. These are really small cups, so if it works better for you, you can kind of empty it out into a bigger cup or bowl or plate or something like that. I am making do with what I have because I don't want to get up and go upstairs to get something else. All right, so it's starting to mix around. I can see clearly it's starting to stick together, but it doesn't have quite enough moisture really to hold it. So I'm going to add another teaspoon. After I do 2 teaspoons, it's just going to be kind of drips or even spraying from my bottle from that point on. All right, so I'm going to just start emptying it into my hand. I can always add more water as I go. Okay, so right now this is just the soil that came out on the top. I didn't do a great job of mixing in the clay yet. So I'm going to just scoop the clay out with the bottom of my spoon. Okay. Smear it onto my hand like a paste. All right, and actually 2 teaspoons looks like it could be the right amount for me. There could be a slightly different quantity of clay and soil in each cup. So again, just add water a little bit at a time when you're doing this at home. Okay, so I am just going to, almost like Play-Doh, just keep smushing this and rolling it around in my hand until I get pretty much a Play-Doh consistency where it's sticking together, it's not super wet, and I can form it into a ball. Okay, when you're doing the seed bombs, you can either make one or you can break it in half and do 2 smaller ones. It's up to you. Okay, what you're going to do is first get the clay and soil mixture to the right consistency. Then you can either, like I said, keep it as one whole seed bomb, or you can break it into 2. I'm actually going to break mine into 2. Okay, so I'll break it in half. Again, make sure they're formed well. So I'm going to form it into a ball. Put one over here and work this into the right shape. If you have like little twigs or things like that sticking out, you can take those out. But for the most part, we're using compost along with the clay, and the compost actually is pretty fine, so it shouldn't have too many twigs and things like that. All right, now I have the two halves. So I am just going to very quickly rinse my hands off, not so they're completely clean, but at least so I can pick up these wildflower seeds more easily without making a huge mess. Okay, so now what you want to do is you want to grab a little plate. Okay, I'm just going to use one of the kids' dinner plates. And you want to take your wildflower mix and you are going to just pour it out onto the plate. And what we're going to do, it's almost like taking those cake pops and rolling them around in sprinkles. You're going to take your seed bomb and roll it around in the wildflower mixture. Okay, so it looks like so. All right, and then you can put it off to the side, and then you're going to take your other one and roll that around. Make sure we get as many on there as possible. All right, so then you can just take these seed bombs and just roll them around your hand a little bit more, so that way you're pushing the seeds down into the soil and clay mixture. Looks like there's a couple marigold seeds in here, so I'm just going to push those in a little bit better. Okay, and then we do the same thing to the first one. Now, what you're going to do is you are going to leave these out on your plate or your tray for 24 hours so that they can dry. Once they've dried, you can then put them into your seed bomb bag. And then you can either throw them somewhere in your yard, you can give them to someone as a gift, whatever you would like to do. So there's a nice little description of what what our seed bombs are right there on the bag. You can put your name on there, who it was made by, and you can also decorate it. You can draw flowers or put some color, whatever you would like to do to make this look pretty. And then, like I said, once your seed bombs are dry, you can go ahead, put them inside, and either throw them somewhere at home or give them as a gift to someone. So thank you very much, and I will see you soon.